So much of what we talk about at Summit is very product related or product focused, but our next talk is a panel with 4 real forward thinkers about what it means to build a collaborative culture at a company. Our moderator is Michal Levram from Fortune magazine. She's going to start a conversation with 4 of our panelists. And the first one next to me here is Mike Cannon-Brooks. You may recognize him from the keynote. Quite a celebrity around here. He's the co-founder of Atlassian. Next to him we have Jim O'Neill, who's the Chief Information Officer at HubSpot. Ongoing we have Daniel Moeller from GPShopper, and he is the Director of Software Development. And finally we have Patty Chan, who gave me her business card because she was recently promoted to Managing Director of Projects.
Congratulations.
So take it away, Michal. Thank you.
All right. So in the interest of collaboration, maybe I'll turn my chair around so that you guys aren't all left out. Thank you all for being here. I was wondering if maybe the panelists could take just maybe 30 seconds each and give us a line about what your company does and a line about what you do at the company to sort of set the context. What do you do?
I work at Atlassian. Am I on?
Hello?
I can hear you okay.
So yeah, we you know what we do.
I don't think your mic is on, actually.
I think it is.
Can you guys hear? Yeah.
Nope, it's on now. It's on now. Here we go. You don't need an introduction. Thank you all for being here.
Hi, I'm Jim O'Neill. I'm the CIO of HubSpot. Is this mic not on either?
I can hear you fine. Can you guys hear him okay?
Now I'm all paranoid if my mic's on or not.
No.
So HubSpot's out to change the way the world does marketing, make it inbound. And basically what that means is engagement-based, so social media, blogging, the Twitter sphere, all that, really helping small businesses take advantage of that. So I call myself the chief janitor. That means I do IT, and I kind of clean up our messes because we're very experimental.
So GPShopper, we develop mobile solutions for major retailers and brands. As developer, the lead of all in development, I manage all the projects and implementations that we go through.
And I'm Patty. I run project management for Intridea. We build custom web and mobile products for clients from Fortune 500 to startups as well.
Great, thank you guys. So Mike, I'm going to start with you actually, and not just because this is your company's conference, but I want to hear about this party that you guys recently had. Did you all see the video? This was a party in Sydney, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Sure.
so it looked like a pretty wild time. But no, I want to know how when you're talking about culture, setting the culture sort of from day one, you guys have a very interesting culture from what I hear, besides the party. How did you go about early on setting the tone for that?
Well, I mean, culture, and people always ask about creating culture. I guess we've always taken the opinion that you can't really create it, you can just kind of add to it. Like each person you hire, we've always tried to hire culture first. So they've got to bring something extra, a little textural ingredient that makes the culture more rich as we kind of go along. And so, I mean, that's the attitude we've always taken with hiring, and then the culture is, a little bit taken care of by itself. And then it's a question of making sure that the tools and everything else you have supports that. And we think of our events as kind of a bit of a cultural tool. We've always tried to run big events for employees that take them out of their comfort zone and help them do something that they wouldn't be able to do normally. Right? So we're not really into the let's all go and have a dinner, we'll throw them off a building or something that they wouldn't have done, and then we'll take them out of their comfort zone. But it's going to be memorable, and they're going to go away and think, wow, I learned something from that.
Okay. What about you guys? What do you did you set a culture early on, or is it also sort of all about hiring and who you hire? And
it's a little bit of both. So we definitely believe in the hire first attitude. Is like 80 to 90% of everyone that we bring in the door, they have to be some superpower.
Yeah. Can we get the mic turned on or turned up?
How's that? Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So totally agree with Mike.
No, it's not.
Pointing it up.
Just hold it
There we
like
go.
as if
Hold it
it's a
like this.
big
How's this?
microphone. Yeah.
My arm won't get tired. But totally agree with Mike. 80-90% is culture. We do take a little bit more of a pragmatic approach, though. So we have some guiding principles, and they really are pretty ingrained into how we actually run the business. And one very simple one, and this is kind of controversial, it's like use good judgment. We hire very smart people, very autonomous people that can make good decisions. So our culture is really around not having rules and policies. It's really around trusting people. And we have to be very deliberate with that, because as we get bigger and bigger, there's oftentimes people will be questioning and challenging that, specifically from the outside. And you just kind of have to call BS on that and say, we're going to let our people really drive this. So it's deliberately trying not to set into the norm and really trying to push the boundaries around that, and then hiring people that have that aptitude.
Did you set those cultures, those values from the very beginning of the company, though?
Yeah, they were. So literally there's a famous, to us famous, and we're a small company, where one of the engineers asked to take some time off and how do you need to track it? And our CEO called bullshit on it and said, why do I want to track this? You worked last Saturday, you delivered a great product. Why are we going to mar ourselves down with that? So literally that was probably 3 months into the company, and it's been uphill or downhill depending on which side of the fence that you're on. From there, those are the kind of things that we want to think about.
So unlimited vacation days.
It's unlimited. We got confused with someone called it no vacation policy, and they thought that meant you have to work all the time at a startup, but it's unlimited, it's use good judgment, and perform, hit your metrics, and everyone's happy.
Oh. How many of you, just curious, how many of you work for companies, run companies where you have an unlimited vacation day policy? Few. And it works well? How about you guys? Can you share a little bit about how you go about setting the culture and whether you have core values?
Sure, we definitely have core values at GPShopper. It's really hard to force culture and kind of institute it. It kind of has to happen grassroots. It has to happen as a part of the culture. When you're coming to work every day, you're taking pride in what you do. You're sharing it with the people you work with and the process and tools you're using. But you can only create these concepts. You can't say, okay, tomorrow I want to have great culture and just force it through. So it's really important to have an open environment, and taking pride in what you do is going to help kind of facilitate any sort of cultures you want to achieve. But I don't think it's a switch you can turn on and off. It's something you build over time with the people that you have at the company.
And Patty, can you shed some light also on what your company's approach is to those values and setting that culture early on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll echo what Mike said, which is you can't force culture onto a company. It organically happens from who you hire. Although one thing that I'll add about our company is that from day one, it was founded on this belief that you should be able to live and work anywhere you want. And so we have headquarters in DC, but we're all distributed in 20 different cities all over the world. And that is a big part of our culture. Our core value is that we are passionate about what we do at work, but then we're also passionate about having a lifestyle out of work and putting that just as importantly. So that is certainly something about our culture.
And is that something that, it seems like at least in Silicon Valley, there's been a little bit of a move actually back to physical offices. And I'm sure we all saw Marissa Meyer's, memo that got out there about getting Yahooers back into the office and not having them out kite surfing and whatever in the afternoons. But do you see that from your employees? Do you see that people want that liberty and flexibility, or do they also want at the same time a space that they can go into, collaborate in person with their colleagues?
The reason why our company was founded in the way it was is we started noticing so many advancements in the tools available to us that we went, why should we restrict ourselves to working with people, brilliant people, that we only find in our own city? What we realized was that there's so many smart people scattered across the globe. The ability to work with them and not force them to relocate to our headquarters in DC has just paid dividends in what we're able to accomplish. And so to your question of, do our employees wish they had an office to go into in order to collaborate in person, face-to-face? We love that we actually talk to somebody 3,000 miles away. And we have completely kind of overhauled our project management process in order to make that possible. And we find that because of these great tools, Jira, Confluence, HipChat in particular, we don't need it. And a big part of that is bringing ourselves to work too. We're not just a bunch of robots. We do bring our personalities to work, and that's what makes it possible.
what about working between? You guys have some. I'm sure all of you have some different time zones that you're working across. But can technology help you overcome that, or is that still today an issue? Either one, whoever wants to.
I think, look, geography and time zones and travel is until we have a hyperloop or whatever that we can fly around instantly, it's always going to be an issue, right? The thing that I find interesting about distributed companies, however much distributed they are from 100% to little bits, is having any amount of distribution forces you to kind of think about culture and the value of spending time together. Like, I'm sure you guys get together occasionally, but if you go to the same place every day with the same group, you're never forced to think about that cultural question of spending time together, whereas I find that when we travel, we're very efficient with the time we spend and getting, I almost have more dinners with employees in San Francisco than I do in Sydney, because when I come here, I think, right, I'm going to fill my schedule and make the most of this amount of time, because that travel's a relatively limited commodity, right? And it changes the way you think about it in terms of culture and travel. So, yep, there's a lot of new tools, but nothing replaces face-to-face contact. And we spend an inordinate amount of travel proportionally because we have a relatively distributed company, and that's kind of
So even for those of you who have a workforce that is very distributed, people that work from home, from kind of satellite offices, satellite locations, do you have an organized, like once a month or an annual or some kind of organized way for everybody in the company, even as you get bigger and bigger, to get together and see each other face to face? Do you do that?
Yeah, at GPShopper we do something what's called Friday Forums, and about twice a month we'll all get together as a company, and it'll be an open forum for anybody at the company to bring anything up, and the management team will go through and kind of present the major goals for that time period. And then after that, it's encouraged that as a community, everybody kind of goes out and does things together and kind of shares experiences together. One point that I think, just to follow up what Mike was saying, is just a sense of community, and kind of that's ingrained in the cities you're in. I know in New York and Chicago, it's like there's a lot of pride about the growing tech communities in those cities. So being part of that growth and just facilitating that is a really good feeling, and I think you see it in the pride and joy that everybody has when they're going to events in that city, or they're representing it somewhere else, like I am here. So, so it's a really good feeling.
Yeah, we actually have it almost built in naturally because we are client servicing, and so every time we kick off a new project, the project team, even though they're within our company, it's always our employees, they get reshuffled every 3 to 6 to 9 months. And when we kick off with a new project with a client, we'll fly to the client and kick off in person. And that's just this built-in way where various Intridians, we call ourselves, will meet face to face.
I think that was a species on Star Trek.
Probably was. To Daniel's point about having a time and place, being in the city that you're in, so we feel that kind of 20-fold, because we're each person who's in either Chicago or Seattle or Beijing, we're actually the Intridian there is actually very involved in the local community. And we have various things like stipends for you to go sponsor your local meetup. And we very much encourage our folks to not only interact with each other within our company, but interact with their community that they're part of. Go out, stimulate, and then bring it back. So yeah, we have that time and place as well, just on a slightly broader level.
And you're all working for companies that are growing and hiring right now, from my understanding. So what do employees want? I mean, what do younger employees in particular, when they come in and it's no longer just, they're trying to sell themselves to you, you're trying to sell yourselves to them now. How does culture fit into that, and how do you sort of convey, not only how do you realize, figure out whether they're a good fit for you, but how do you convey and make your culture attractive to them? Anybody want to take a stab?
Yeah, so we, hopefully this is hearing now. So we at HubSpot,
That's
we have
not
this thing
awkward
called
at all, right?
culturecode.com. And our co-founder actually maniacally went through kind of all these quirky values that we have and principles that we have and codified it on SlideShare. And it's a little exhaustive. It's like 150 slides. But
How many values do you have?
There's 10 core things, and literally use good judgment is one, transparency is one, autonomy is one. And really what we're trying to convey is stories of how we exercise those kind of 10 founding principles, or whatever you want to call them. And it's been a huge qualifier for people, because like we expect people to really look at that. And a lot of our interview process is based around that. It's like, tell me how you would, interact in these situations. So we set expectations pretty hard. It's a startup, we're going to work super hard, but we love what we do. We do it on their schedules versus ours. I think that the classic schedule you asked about time zones is kind of deteriorating. And we call it work-life fit, not work-life balance, because those two lines have been so blurred nowadays. So we think we do a reasonable job setting those expectations, and it's more so, do they want to work with us as much as we want to work with them? And that's been super helpful. It's a self-qualifier in many, many ways. So that's how we do it.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
We have our values on almost all the meeting room walls. So if you come for an interview, you'll certainly see them and either agree or not agree. And they're on the website, etc. So I assume there's people that opt out because of those. But they're going to opt out early in the process, so it's already a filtering mechanism. And then the second thing we do is try to use our people. Like if we're selling an employee to come work for us, we give them as many interviews with as many people as possible. Like we have an awesome team, so the more people you put in front of them, I want them going home to their job going, geez, I met 5 people from Atlassian, they're all awesome, and then they go look at their colleagues and think, yeah, I want to go work at that. Right? It's not really, you're not selling them, you're just saying, hey, I've got a great team of people here, meet as many of them as you can, and people self-select into, enjoying having met that many people. So we try to put as many people as we can in front of them.
Yeah. And on the hiring side, I don't know if some of you have read Tony Hsieh's book, the Zappos founder, not founder, CEO. But Zappos they have a very interesting culture, and they have an interesting approach to hiring also, where I think there was an example in the book where, the taxi driver who takes a prospective employee from the airport to Zappos headquarters, they'll then ask the taxi driver, how was so-and-so, were they courteous, how did they interact with you, and they kind of use that to to inform their hiring decisions. How do you guys make sure, because so much of this is about having the right fit, so how do your values play into your hiring process?
So we do I think it's close to what Mike just mentioned, a very peer-based hiring. It's not a top-down.
I think we can't hear you again.
Can't see me. There we
There
go.
we
I'm
go.
going to eat the microphone. But so we do peer-based hiring, and it's really not a top-down. It's very team-driven, and I kind of use the analogy of Survivor, of people voting people off the island. If one person in this whole peer group is doing the interviews and they don't feel comfortable with that person joining because they don't find that they bond with them or they feel like they're going to add something unique to the team, we stop the interview process pretty short. I think we have less than a 0.1% conversion rate from original source or resume to we hire someone. So it's a pretty excruciating, and Mike said the same thing. We may spend 10 hours interviewing someone. That's okay. So we really leave it up to our employees. We think they will hire people better than them. That's kind of one of our values is hire people better than yourselves, frankly. And that's worked out super, super well. So it's very transparent. It's very peer-based, and it can be heavy as far as all the interactions, but it's worked out really well for us.
We asked very quickly, we ask employees to make sure that they're going to hire someone they want on their team. It's very easy in interviewing people to be like, yeah, that developer seemed okay. And it's like, all right, it's you and him working on this. He's like, wait a second, no, I don't want to hire that guy now.
Yeah.
Right? That's a decision they should be making. Not do they fit Atlassian broadly, which is kind of what I guess people intuitively say, but if you got to sit next to this person and work with them, go out for a drink with them.
Don't
eat
you guys
lunch
have
with them,
like a
et cetera,
beer
do
test?
want to
Isn't
work
that
with
what you
one
call it?
person one-on-one, and that's it.
You have isn't it called a beer test? Or you have an
We used to
airport
a beer
test?
We just sound like drunks if we did that. But that was more about the person themselves in terms of, the beer test. And it doesn't matter if you don't drink beer, if you want a cup of tea, if you want anything, a glass of water, it doesn't matter to me.
You're not required to consume alcohol for it.
And I've heard other people, I don't know if it was you guys, talk about the crossing the road test. Like if you see someone coming at you who's another employee and you think, geez, and you cross the road or try to avoid them, that's a good sign that you don't want to spend time with that person, right? And our beer test was kind of the same thing. It's like, would I want to go out for a beer with this person? Are they interesting, right? It doesn't matter what you're interested in. It's like, can I have a conversation and take something away and say, wow, an interesting individual. That's what it was about.
Yeah, and I like the airport test because it's a stressful situation. Maybe you've been delayed for a plane and then you're stuck at the airport for another extra 4 hours. Would you be willing and want to be stuck at the airport for an extra 4 hours with this person? It's a stressful situation. And that has an immediate analogy to when you're working on your next sprint or your next build. You're down on the wire, you're working at 2 a.m. Do you want to stay up with this person? That's a huge one. And we're extra conscious of it because as people who don't go into an office, we know it is a lot easier to not turn on your laptop and show up and do work. But if you like the people that you work with, that is such a more powerful motivator than HR slapping you on the wrist for being late to the office.
I just think that most people are going to be really honest about what they want, and the experiences they're going to want to get out of a good work environment, and they're just going to say, look, I want to work at a place where people are respectful, we build a great product, we get things done in a timely fashion, and they're going to tell you about their visions, what they like to do in their off time, and if that aligns with your company and what you've got going on, then it's going to be a nice fit. And I think it's important just to hear them out, ask the right questions, and if that means at an airport or on the bus or wherever it is, it can be in your office in an interview as well. And you could just say, what are you looking for, and what are your past experiences, and also when they walk in and they see a nice open environment, it helps. A lot of times people just celebrate when they don't see cubicles.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. I think this industry as a whole is moving in that direction, which is really nice, but it's surprising. We're in downtown Chicago and seeing people come in and not see cubicles. You'd be surprised about the reaction.
Feel liberated.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I want to take any questions from the audience in just a minute, but wanted to ask you guys also on the tools, the technology side of it. This isn't an Atlassian conference after all, so we might want to go there. You are all obviously customers and users of Atlassian products, but how do you get your employees, your user base, to use them, to engage? Because they're only as good as the number of people you have using them, right? So how have you gone about driving adoption internally of these kind of collaboration tools? And it doesn't have to be Atlassian only, it can be other collaboration tools. So.
For us, we've been super, super lucky. Hopefully this is working. When we started the company, we literally installed Confluence within a couple of months. And everyone adopted it. Our co-founders, we have board members who actually give us information. We let employees self-select projects and post them out there and get feedback. Pricing and packaging changes. So to us, it's just it's kind of our civic duty. Everyone kind of has a role in contributing, and we don't force it. But I will admit there's a feeling of being left out if you don't participate because it's so viral. And there are goofy things from contests on what are we getting for beer for that week to literally how are we going to fund the next 6 months of R&D. So it's everyone and everything, and it's really kind of just part of our DNA at this point.
So with GPShopper's growth, we've really had to institute a lot of new process and these new tools, and I can tell you adoption is extremely difficult. You can't just say, okay, here's this tool and you need to use it tomorrow. You need to explain why, the reasoning, contextualize the entire thing, put it in the frame of a big picture. Once the people who have to use that tool or that process see that, things will start to click. Let them provide feedback, let them push back, and have a give and take with that process and that tool, and then it can really help frame up what they might be using. Once they feel as though they have ownership in this tool or this process, they're going to enhance the training through the rest of the organization. We like to call them flag carriers, flag bearers, but those people are going to be the keys to proper adoption, because adoption really is a huge obstacle in new process and new tools.
Patty?
Yeah, for us it's showing the value. So at our company, because we work across so many different time zones, removing dependencies on each other is a huge focus for me as the person who's in charge of kind of streamlining how we do things and shipping things on time. Removing blockers or needing to ask a specific person and get an answer from them removing those things is a huge task. It's a big part in what makes us succeed. Confluence, Jira is what does that. When people realize that if they need a specific piece of information, they don't have to go and ask Bob. They can go into Jira, log into the correct project, and find it there. It's self-enabling. Mm-hmm. That's what makes it, because people know that this is what makes their jobs easier.
And Mike, you guys eat your own dog food, I know, but any
I
thoughts?
You could live at Atlassian without using our tool. What else you would be using? You might use NetSuite. Two things I would say to that. One is we do have customers come to us and say, install Confluence, but none of my people are collaborating. Mm-hmm. Sort of like it's our fault. And we try to do the best job we can in the products, obviously, but a lot of it is culture. It sounds like all these guys have great culture in their company, and that is probably where you should start, is with the people rather than the tools, like people, processes, all sorts of things. The tools can help amplify that, but if you have a bunch of people that don't want to work together, it almost doesn't matter what collaboration you tool from any vendor you install. So that's the first thing. And the second thing that we, do is we try to introduce them in very simple and non-threatening ways. So, we have a whole lot of little lessons as part of your introduction to Atlassian, different what I'm thinking of, introduction, points that you have to do. And one of them is you have to write an introductory blog post to the company. Mm-hmm. So it forces everyone to use Confluence to write an introductory blog. I mean, it's pretty simple. They say, hey, I'm Jim. I used to work here. I work here. I did these things. Here's a picture of my dog. Mm-hmm. I love tennis. Whatever it is, right? They just write kind of a thing, but it gets them to use a tool for the first time, and then people write a comment back and go, hey, Jim, work's coming on board. And they've kind of seen one little loop happen in a very simple, non-threatening way. If you tell someone, write a requirement specification, I got to learn this tool, where you say, write about yourself, it's, mm-hmm. People write long ones, people write short ones, people write prose, poetry. I mean, it's a very simple lesson, but it served us very well for the day one experience, right?
Great. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask? There's one right over here. There's a microphone heading over to you. Hopefully you don't have the same issues that we've had up here.
I'll share my microphone.
Yeah.
Did you ever have to
Can you say your name, by the way, and the company you're with?
From EF Labs. You were featured in the video, in the Advancing Humanities project. Did you ever have to fire a talented person because it's not a culture fit? And if you did, can you describe that experience?
Good question. Anybody want to take first?
We certainly have. So one of these guiding principles is called the no a-hole rule, and the no a-hole rule. And it truly is. It gets back to, would you want to be in an airport, or would you want to be a roommate or have a beer? And I think we've just learned, we looked at what Netflix and a lot of other bigger companies had done, and I think they all struggled with the same thing. They might be overperforming, but they're toxic to the environment or to their peers. And the impact on your company and your culture as a whole is just not worth it. So we tend to talk to the person right away, have a very frank and open conversation about it, and we honestly will pay people to leave. We'll say, we're going to give you a good package. This isn't working out. You're probably a star somewhere else. You just can't be a star here. I think that's helped our managers do really well. They get more comfortable with those conversations because they don't feel threatened, frankly, that they can't manage this person. If the manager is struggling trying to manage someone, then that's honestly taking away from the whole company. So we have a long way to go to be perfect at it, but we're getting better at it every day, I think. That's what we do.
Anybody else have an example of that?
It's a weird question for me to answer with so many employees in the room. We've absolutely had to do that on multiple occasions, right? I tell guys on hiring, we've got to get it 80% correct. I reckon if you have an 80% correct hiring process, it's probably about as what you can expect, which means 20%'s not in the correct bucket. So we've absolutely fired people, let them go, for pure cultural reasons when they're overperforming. And I think the most important thing we do there is we try to talk to the manager and support them in that decision, because who usually fights that is the direct manager, who's then getting judged on some performance. If you've got 10 employees and you're down one, you can do 9/10 of the work effectively. And if he's feeling like he's losing his best employee, he needs his goals or his metrics, whatever it is, to be moved down, for that to be acceptable to the organization and embraced by everybody that is doing it for this reason. And the cultural fit is a reason, and he'll hire again and it'll move back up again. But where that comes unstuck is where the manager thinks I can't afford to lose that person because I have to hit this goal and they're getting me there, and then other teams see that and it just spirals out of control. So we certainly work with the manager both on the actual process of doing that, but also on allowing them to miss a goal or whatever it happens to be, and saying that that's okay, that's a good positive decision for the organization to do that.
Do you have a question over here?
Yes, I did.
Go ahead.
Hello. My name is Billy. I'm with Data Tactics. My question was a flat organization, that's the buzz. But what's the ratio of people rowing the boat to beating the drum in your companies?
Patty?
So we're about 50 people scattered all over the world, and our leadership team rowing the boat is about, not including our board of directors, about 6 people.
What about, Mike and Jim, you have somewhat similar sized companies, I think, in terms of employees. How does that work out for your size company?
We're about 700, 750 people. I would struggle to answer the question of how many people are rowing the boat versus beating the drum. I hope, sort of in a way, everyone's beating the drum. And
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
our
exactly
direct leadership team is about 10 people, but then, you know, our broader people leaders is probably a 50-person group that meets in various different things and separates into different kind of groups, I guess. Sorry, I can't see you behind that there. And I think your organization needs to fit what you're doing in a way. It's not as simple as saying a binary choice between flat or not flat, hierarchical, whatever the alternative is, right? I think it needs to fit. So some parts of our org are much flatter and some parts are much more hierarchical for geographic reasons, product reasons, whatever. And I think people kind of allow them to make that choice. No, we enforce flatness, I guess.
Yeah, ours is similar. So just shy of 700 people. It's controversial because we didn't have titles, I think, until maybe this year, because someone said that we finally had to do it for maybe legal reasons. And we look at it as autonomy is more important than the reporting structure. So what we really empower people to do is, even though they may have a manager, quote unquote, which is more from a career growth, training, mentorship, leading by example, and it's super important. Our managers have to produce results. They can't just manage people. Like, I still write code, and I shouldn't be writing code, but I still do write code. And I think what that really empowers is this autonomy where people know they can go to our CEO and say, hey, I've got this great idea, I'm going to go work on it, and here's how it's going to make the business better. So it's again one of those things that I think as we get bigger gets tugged at a lot because it's unconventional. And we say we're flat, but we have a ton of people now that we have titles that have some sort of manager in their title. But the day that an individual from day one can't actually move the needle in the company is the day that we fail. So we really, from our CEO, myself, and everyone else, spend a ton of time making sure people's voices. We also hire a lot of introverts, I should say. Software engineers tend to be introverted, and that's what's great about the Atlassian tools. It actually gives you an electronic voice. So it's this balancing act, but I think autonomy rules for us and keeps the hierarchies at a minimum.
Yes, over here. Can you get the...
Oh, I think we have a question over here.
Sorry, over there. Sorry.
Hi,
Can't see.
thanks. Every now and then, even at my company, we have a really good culture, but something will happen. There'll be some shift, or a leader will leave, or there's a controversial decision, and morale can kind of be a little dicey. Have you found anything to help bring equilibrium back to its original state?
So I think, could you guys hear the question okay? Because I couldn't really well. So maybe one of you could rephrase the question. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that every now and then there'll be something that happens that makes a shift in the culture and in morale. And is there anything aside from waiting it out or just trying to listen and trying to help that you've found that's a nice way to bring back the regular equilibrium?
Do you have some thoughts on that?
So here's where I think leadership is extremely important, is that, you have to lead by example. And if there is a tough time, and in every company there is, all eyes are on certain people. Depending on how you react, on how you come into work that day, it'll affect it in one way or the other. And I think leaders who are appointed as that should really react accordingly. And sometimes it's just buckling down and being very straightforward with people about the situation, but also staying positive and not letting that kind of affect your day completely. That'll transpire into the people at the company. And I can remember one time, we had a really tough time, and we was just after Friday forums, and I had to just pull everybody in the room and kind of give everybody a pep talk. I know it's a little cliche, but definitely worked. Just people needed to hear that was something that did happen, and the reaction wasn't complete chaos. So I think leadership is extremely important in that case.
Yeah, and I'd say looking forward, for every failure or misstep that you have to face, there's always something else to celebrate just right ahead. So find whatever that is as quickly as possible, even if it's small, and rally the team around it.
We had a few questions over here, I think.
So we have time for one more. We have about
Just one
3
more? Okay,
minutes
because
left.
the clock, I think, is wrong.
I think the clock is wrong
It's
as
giving
well.
us, it's being a little bit too,
So we have
yeah.
3 minutes left, so if we can speed through this one, and
Okay.
then you can talk with the
Wanna go
panelists
ahead?
afterwards.
Sorry, we cannot. Maybe you guys can catch these guys later after the panel also.
My name is Paul, and I was curious to know, do you guys have more of an open type of culture in your companies? It's a little bit out of context, but how do you guys handle your yearly performance reviews with your team? I mean, is it your classic standard performance review? You got a manager reviews you, it can be cantankerous, or is it just more of a, is it the Google way of doing things of everybody gets 10% and have a nice day? So I was curious to know if you guys can kind of address how you guys handle your performance reviews. Thank you.
Maybe we can just go down and real quickly,
Sure.
you guys each give us.
I guess we do a little from column A, a little from column B. I mean, we certainly have a classical, as you described, performance process. I mean, I think it's important. It's an important documentation and thought point for a manager to sit down every 6 months and say, here's what I think you're strong at, here's what I think you need to work on, here's what I'm going to help you with, etc. We've certainly tweaked. It'd be interesting to take screenshots of every performance review system we've tried, used, rating scale. I mean, we've tried them all in 11 years, right? And so we certainly have that, but at the same time, we do 360s, etc. And we try to say, we've got one P&L, where one company, we make a lot of different products, etc. But I think you can kind of divide forces too much if you say, well, you do these different things. So we try to, I guess, balance a little bit of both.
Why don't you guys come out with your own performance review tools?
Actually, ironically, the performance review tool that we use is made by an ex-employee that had to move back to Germany and started a company from the Confluence team, which is why it looks incredibly like Confluence.
Okay.
Which is what we use today. It's a good tool.
So for HubSpot, we do have the annual performance review, but what we do is weekly one-on-ones, and it's really every person in the company has a one-on-one. It's 30 minutes. It can be lunch. It can be however the time gets made, and it's just to avoid surprises. So it's you're doing great here. Here's a couple things that I have ideas for, and it's also bi-directional. So a lot of times I get my toughest feedback from the people that I work with daily. We are going through the same challenges of a good social performance system. They just don't seem to exist out there. So we've kind of duct taped and super glued a couple things together. But everything's incremental nowadays, right? So we do incremental reviews, and the year long, I think, is the important part of that check-in and more for documentation.
Yeah, we have the annual performance review as well. I think the delivery of it is extremely important. A lot of it can just be negative. It can be, okay, what you've done wrong. But at the same time, you can deliver just as much feedback on what you should be doing correctly and what your strengths are and how to build up those strengths and focus on that. And you'll see, that person can really respond to that feedback. We've seen that has really been a positive, encouraging approach to performance goals, not necessarily reviews.
Patty?
Yeah, and just like Jim's one-on-one, frequent communication with your manager and vice versa. And then a big thing that we've tried actually is not having them based on the calendar. So not having quarterly reviews or annual reviews. We base them around milestones. So let's say there's a project that is being delivered and it took 4 months to reach culmination. that's when our review happens. So there's context around it. It's not just some ad hoc date on the calendar.
You get constant feedback all the time.
Constant feedback all the time, and then when there's a milestone of a big delivery or a big version bump, then we have a more extensive talk around that so that there's actual things to talk about. It's not just a random date.
To Patty's point, I guess one of the things I forgot that's probably one of the most important things we have done is that's evolved and changed, is separating any notion of pay, bonus, raises, etc., titles, whatever you do, from performance review. So having them combined, they look at the bottom of the page, work out what my bonus is, and they ignore everything that you say in between. It doesn't matter who they are, they ignore everything. So we're actually a few months apart now, the pay raise cycle, etc., all the sort of HR, the finance part of HR, which is important, right? It's an important piece of the overall thing, is very much separated from the performance review process, which is about your performance. Otherwise, they don't hear any of what you say.
But how do you gauge what it is that you're going to compensate the employee if it's not based off of the performance rating?
I mean, it's the same manager that does the two, and obviously they're interlinked. If you're performing well, you're going to get a raise. If you're not performing, but actually physically separating, you can start by just separating the two meetings, separate those things. So you want them to hear your feedback, and you want to hear their feedback, where they're not just looking at a dollar number, or if it's a rating number that then relates mathematically to a dollar number. All that sort of stuff is like this conversation should be about your performance, etc. And maybe the company's doing badly, performed really well. There's no raises this year. I want that to be a totally separate conversation or whatever.
So it's related but not timed at the same time.
It's absolutely related to performance, right? You perform better, you should be compensated as such, but just don't have it at the same time.
Well, I think we're out of time. Sorry we didn't get to all of the questions, and I'm sorry also for the audio, the technical difficulties, but hopefully if you even heard half of that, you got something out of it. Thank you guys so much for coming, and thank you to the panelists.